of just 6 submarines. The wolf packs had comprehensively demonstrated their superiority over the convoy defences. At this rate of destruction, Great Britain, despite enforcing a strict rationing programme, was going to be 6 million tonnes of imports short of the minimum required to maintain existence. In November 1940, the U-boat's happy time finally came to an end, when fierce storms sweeping through the North Atlantic forced many to withdraw. Allied countermeasures had also begun to have an effect. Convoys had been routed further north towards Iceland, and merchant radio codes had been altered. The weather, which had driven many U-boats home, had also caused Hitler to abandon his plans to invade England. And many small warships, released from the protective screen thrown around Britain's south coast, became available as convoy escorts. By now, most of the 50 American First World War destroyers, exchanged for British bases, had arrived at western approaches. In early 1941, the U-boats once more returned to battle, refreshed and confident in the belief that victory could soon be won. However, the Allied improvements in convoy defence were now starting to have an effect, and to their surprise, the U-boats were far less successful than before. Most convoys escaped the German submarines unscathed. The U-boat arm suffered a further setback in March, when its 3 most brilliant commanders were lost in the space of 2 weeks. Gunther Prien, hero of Scapa Flow, was killed having sunk 33 ships. Joachim Schepke destroyed 37 ships before being sunk by a British escort. And Otto Kretschmer, greatest ace of all, was captured, having destroyed 44 ships, the most successful naval commander in history. However, this temporary and unexpected low point in the fortunes of the U-boat arm was more than offset by the successes of the German surface navy and the Luftwaffe. In February 1941, the battlecruisers Scharnhorst and Gneisenau had left their base at Kiel and had broken through the British blockade into the Atlantic. They wreaked havoc on Allied shipping, destroying 22 ships in just 6 weeks. More importantly, the warships caused widespread fear and disrupted the entire convoy system. The result was a severe drop in British imports. At the same time as the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau were on operations, the pocket battleship Admiral Scheer was preying on convoys in the North Atlantic. Further afield, the heavy cruiser Hipper had been prowling along the African coast, while in the south, the secret raiders were causing panic, forcing the Allies to hunt them down and diverting valuable warships from escort duty. The Luftwaffe too had increased its activity in the Atlantic, and Hitler had put Group 40 under the direct operational control of the Kriegsmarine. The result was 27 merchant ships sunk by aircraft in February alone. Allied leaders were deeply concerned at the growing level of cooperation between the German Navy and Air Force. Complete disaster for the Allies was only averted by the capture of a German patrol boat with its code books intact. The Allied codebreakers could now pinpoint the positions of many U-boats. For a time, convoys could simply be diverted clear out of the way of enemy-infested waters. Since the beginning of the battle, the British had been researching how best to use the few escort ships they had. One result was the development of the escort group. The escort group was perfected by Captain John F. Walker, who was later knighted for killing 2 submarines in a single morning. The group was a formation of small warships, which, unlike the failed search and patrol groups, would operate in close consort with the convoys. Later in the battle, when there were more than enough warships, the more successful escort groups would be given complete independence and renamed support groups. These would move from convoy to convoy, protecting the merchant ships through the most dangerous stretches of ocean. The escort group travelled in close consort with a convoy and was usually made up of corvettes and destroyers. When a U-boat was detected, the group would break off from the convoy, leaving just enough permanent escorts to secure the perimeter. The group would bring maximum firepower to bear on the submarine, inflicting as much damage as possible and forcing it to dive. The escorts then had to find the submarine with their ASDIC underwater detectors. The warships sailed line abreast 3 or 4 miles apart, maximizing the area of sea covered. Once ASDIC contact was made, then the escorts launched a barrage of depth charges, either destroying the U-boat or forcing it to the surface, where the wounded U-boat would be shelled or rammed. No escort group would ever give up the hunt until its prey was destroyed or had clearly escaped. The first 4 escort groups at western approaches supported convoys as far as 35 degrees west. In May, the Royal Canadian Navy received 8 new destroyers and 20 corvettes, which meant that now, for the very first time in the battle, the convoys could be given full surface protection right across the Atlantic. Air cover too had been considerably increased, and RAF Sunderlands and Hudsons had begun flying from Iceland, providing cover out to 400 miles. Additional air bases had also been completed at Gibraltar, Sierra Leone, and Halifax. As a result of the growing strength of Allied defences in the North Atlantic, Dönitz decided to transfer the U-boats to less well-protected waters further south. While the U-boat force had struggled against ever-stronger convoy defences, the German surface fleet had also faced considerable difficulties. After returning from successful tours, the Scharnhorst, Gneisenau and the Admiral Scheer were all blockaded in Kiel by the RAF and the Royal Navy. Far worse for Germany, Bismarck, the Reich's most powerful warship, was attacked by British battleships George V and Rodney and sunk off the southern coast of Ireland. She had never even seen the convoys she was meant to annihilate. By late spring 1941, the Allies had successfully contained or destroyed the bulk of the German surface navy, finally ending the threat of German warships. Every month, convoy defences had been steadily improved, yet in May 1941, 66 merchant ships were sunk, 25 of which had been sailing in convoy. The escort groups were growing ever more efficient, but as yet, there were just not enough warships to turn the tide of battle. The Allies' defence against the wolf pack was nowhere near foolproof. In mid-1941, 8 U-boats were transferred to the Arctic Ocean. Hitler, in his war against the Soviet Union, needed to destroy supplies being sent to the Russians from the west. The transfer of submarines away from the Atlantic convoys meant a desperately needed reprieve for Great Britain. Imports rose to 1 million tons a week, well above the minimum required. The Allies consolidated their gains by